under the same roof, we share the love. Embracing the differences like hand in glove. Spreading peace and joy, it's a beautiful sight. Together we shine in each other's light. And how do we stand in love's pure might? Watching the world share in love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World. We have so much to talk about today, coming in from a fresh weekend. We covered so much. In fact, we had a great show last night in regards to all sorts of things involving the war or the conflict that's in the Middle East. And we talked about Nancy Guthrie and so much more. You know, we spend most of our lives not even appreciating how valuable it is until we get older. And then we start to see that all the ups and downs, all those journeys, they all make life beautiful in some peculiar way. But oftentimes, many of us raise children or other people's children. And it's a beautiful concept because you get a chance to help an individual grow up and make something of themselves. That's something that causes the heart to rejoice. And for the many Americans that are okay with sending their children to fight in the army, to be in the military, oftentimes they do so trusting that the government is going to use these individuals in a way that's noble and for conflicts that are important for solving world's problems and so forth. But we're starting to hear this rumble and this mumble. We hear these whispers in the air. Perhaps you catch it in the wind, where we hear that this could be Israel's war. Have you heard that? Why are we seeing this online? Why are people saying that the American troops, our sons, our daughters, so precious, are being potentially sent to be boots on the ground for the vindication of a different country that has their own people, their own obligations, they have their own concerns. So when we see this happening, this is why people now are starting to say, hey, what's going on here? We all support the America First. We support the military. I've had so many people in my family in the military. I actually have a family member that's in Germany right now, boots on the ground. But we start to wonder, like, wait a minute, what is this about? And are the motives? In many cases, a lot of these issues are stemming back to the Bible. A lot of this, and if you really know the Bible and you go back and you really read it, you'll see that because of the development of man and where man was in the stage when the Bible was written, a lot of this is fighting over land. And here we are in 2026, and we're referring back, and people are still fighting over land. Here in America, I don't think land is the big issue of fighting. A lot of that stems to the religion. Today, we're going to get into a breakdown that Tucker Carlson even did. At the very end of the show, I think he breaks it down to how we're having these conflicts over land. You're going to be amazed when you understand it. But that's just one segment of the many things that we're going to talk about today, folks. We're going to talk about the economy. Why is the stock market seems to be tanking? Why is gas prices going up? Why is food going up, right? Is this temporary? Should you get out of the stock market? Should you go buy gold? What does it mean as far as oil? What does it mean as for our lives and also for our family and the next generations coming along? So we're going to look at all of this, and also we're going to take a look at Nancy Guthrie In fact, tonight we're going to do a deep dive into Nancy Guthrie at 8 p.m. But let's get to the stock market. Let's get an understanding of what's happening, where we are today. And as you come in, hit the like button, share, and subscribe. I really do appreciate having each and every one of you here. And we're not here to push a narrative. We're just common people that are living, right? We're not caring. We set aside before we came into the room. We set aside the Republican. We set aside the Democrat. If you identify as a mushroom today, you're just going to set that aside. Whatever you want to be, you could be. But as far as our minds today, we're just trying to focus on unity and trying to figure out what is happening in the world just so we can navigate, right? Because life is vital. But here in New York, we had a bomb thrown over the weekend. Like, what's happening? I was in New York City, right? We have all these threats at the airport. So, see, now it's not just in the Middle East, it's knocking at your front door because you don't know where the next individual is going to pop off, like the guy did in Austin, Texas, right after all of this happened. So, let's get to it. Thank you so much, guys. Hit the like button, share, and subscribe.
Welcome back. Stocks are selling off this morning. Take a look at futures indicating a triple-digit decline at the start of trading this morning. The Dow Industrial's down 534. The overnight session was even worse. The Nasdaq right now down 273. It all has to do with spike.
Oh my, everything is looking down, but this could be temporary. Do not be in faint of fear. But let's just take a look at it.
Oil prices. Take a look at oil this morning, where we are seeing a huge move upwards above 100. Brent is up 12.5% right now. That is up to 104.30. Crude oil is up 12%. And if you look at this chart here, you can see that Brent is up 45% in a week. Brent above.
Okay, so it's definitely, we're going to be filling it in the pockets with this gas. Gas is definitely going up. It's continuing to go up. Last night, Eric had hit me up, sent me a message and showing just how gas is rapidly moving. And even within the time that we're talking, gas is going up. What is going on? Also, your 401k, you have to understand it's going down because the market is going down. But what does this mean?
Above $100 a barrel, G7 nations discuss tapping emergency reserves with a coordinated release to help cool this market. Brent up better than 45% in a week. Crude even worse. Crude oil is up 53% in a week. Analysts are warning supply shock could also.
Folks, it's up 53% in a week. You have to feel that in your pocket. And a lot of people are already hurting, right?
Push crude toward $150 a barrel. You've got all analysts on Wall Street talking about where this goes next. The halt of.
See, Iran is a key ingredient. That's what we're going to see today. They're a key ingredient when it comes to oil. And in fact, they're trying to commandeer and lock everything down because this is their strategy for war.
Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, of course, is the key here. And that is because it handles 20% of global oil transported through that incredibly important waterway. That is driving sharp price spikes.
They handle 20%, and that 20% is going to mean something in your own personal pocket because we all are buying fuel for heating the home, also for your vehicles and so much more.
The Trump administration announced a $20 billion reinsurance program for oil tankers. And by the way, oil giant Saudi Aramco, the stock posted the largest jump since 2023 as it redirects oil shipments to Red Sea terminals. Gasoline, also a problem. It is surging this morning as well. It is up, as you can see, natural gas up 5.5% and gasoline up 8.75% right now. Joining me now is a Gulf Oil.
Thank you, two-time
Senior Energy Advisor, Tom Closa. Tom, great to have you. Thanks very much for being here this morning. Do you agree with the administration and many of the lawmakers that I spoke with that this is a temporary spike and it will go down once the battles end in the Mideast? What do you think?
Well, I think it has to be temporary. I think, we don't live in a theocracy, but we live in a country where tens of millions of people look at high gasoline prices like the great Satan. So we need to get the Strait of Hormuz reopened and things will calm down quite a bit. I mean, if you look at it, the price of crude oil approached $120 last night, but it was only about $73 in December. So the market is telling you we believe that this is going to be just a violent interregnum. But you've got to deal with things and get that.
And guys, I want to be very balanced here. When Joe Biden left office, fuel was on average around $4.60 $0.60 a gallon. So think about that. Even though we're going up, we're still not back to that level, but could be there very quickly.
Straight open.
So the president has come up with a plan to get traffic moving in the Strait already, but oil CEOs are telling me that we still need to see more security in the Strait. The UAE and Kuwait have already cut oil output as the Iran conflict disrupts the flows through the Strait. Kuwait cut production as storage facilities across the Persian Gulf filled with crude, and Abu Dhabi's national oil company also curbed offshore output. Iraqi oil flow plunged about 70%. And here's what the president is doing now. I spoke with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday about this. Watch this.
This is a short-term disruption for the long-term gain of taking out the rogue Iranian terrorist regime and finally ending their restriction of the free flow of energy in the Middle East and in the Strait of Hormuz. And even with this short-term period throughout Operation Epic Fury, the president and his energy team are on the ball. They've announced political risk insurance for cargo vessels and oil ships that are going to be moving through the Strait. They've announced that the U.S. Navy, if and when necessary, will escort those tankers to ensure that oil can move. The president is also tapping into our newfound market in Venezuela, where, again, there were a lot of panic-ins about that military operation. And look at the success. We are working in a cooperative manner with the interim authorities to bring that oil into the market as expeditiously as possible.
But oil...
We definitely appreciate all the updates from the White House, but one thing that we're starting to learn, and this is why we have independent media, is that oftentimes we're fed propaganda. We hear all of these different scripted dialogues about what's happening, but then we get a chance to see TikTok. We see all of these other formats. We see local people, and they start to tell you, well, the mainstream media is saying that the missile came from this direction, from Iran. But then the local people are saying, no, the missile came this way. So that wasn't Iran. Perhaps it even came from Israel. And then we hear people like Tucker Carlson saying, well, it wasn't Iran. So it's so confusing, right? So that's why even like with Nancy Guthrie case, the sheriff might say one thing, but then as we're boots on the ground, we start to see other things, right? Things are so scripted. And then on top of all of this confusion, we have AI, and people are actually throwing in all of these other made up videos. It's hard to decipher the truth, but this is why we're here processing so much information and trying to maintain a level head so that we can understand and how to live a elevated life and not just be confused by this propaganda.
Executives are telling me that more security is needed. So we want to understand specifically when we might see a let up here. It feels like the Iranians are threatening the U.S., saying, yeah, come to the Strait. We welcome you to actually ramp up the fight.
Well, the Iranians are making a lot of threats with their words, but if you look at their actions with respect to their military, they're not as strong or powerful as they were 9 days ago. That is for sure. We have completely wiped out their Navy. Their Navy is now deemed combat ineffective. Their retaliatory strikes with ballistic missiles has...
A lot of people in the audience are talking about fuel. Tell us, what is the average price of fuel where you are, and just mention your state where you're from.
Decreased 90%. And as their attacks are decreasing, the power and prowess of the U.S. military is increasing.
Tom, is there anything else the president could be doing here to alleviate the situation? What would be your advice? Because there's also...
And guys, we have 300 people. Take a moment, hit the like button, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Do you expect that this Strategic Petroleum Reserve could be used here? Would the president want to tap into that now? What do you think?
That's right, One Love. We have manipulation on all sides, right? All sides. Candace says I should go get a bicycle. I'll be delivering food on a bicycle. Wow, thank you.
I think if you had a coordinated release with the other G7 countries and the IEA, then perhaps you'd have an impact. I mean, we saw the release of crude oil, about half of which was U.S. crude back in 2022. I would want to make one little suggestion, though. This isn't 1987 and 1988, and I think the strait can be secured. But the one thing you have that's a big change now from then is that you have drones, which cost maybe thousands of dollars, capable of taking out assets that are billions of dollars. And that's what makes this different in terms of escorting vessels through the strait and getting the insurance lined up.
Well, it's a great point, and that's why tankers are afraid to make the trek. What are your other options?
All right, so we're going to keep our eyes on what's happening with the market so that we can navigate from a financial perspective. Imagine with your 401k, the baby boomers are taking a hit if they focus on what's happening today. But if this is temporary, this could be a great time to buy if it's temporary. But right now, we don't have enough information to really know how to proceed. But let's notice something that happened. Remember who was leading the way in the past when it came to a lot of the major military operations was Condoleezza Rice. Well, lo and behold, she was back at the White House. We want to understand what's happening in regards to that as well.
This decision to launch this operation was based on a cumulative effect of various direct threats that Iran posed to the United States of America, and the president's feeling based on fact that Iran does pose an imminent and direct threat.
I've said repeatedly since the first briefing over 10 days ago, there was no imminent threat to the United States that I believe would constitute.
So if we don't have an imminent threat, then why would the United States be so involved in also putting the babies, the troops, boots on the ground?
Putting our sailors and soldiers in harm's way.
Well, was Iran a threat to the U.S. or not? Joining us tonight to talk about this and the situation in the Middle East is former Secretary of State, former National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. Secretary Rice, thanks for being here. You know, we have these polls out about Iran, national security threat.
All right, I want to take a quick break here. We see Susie says in California, fuel is $4.97. Okay. Jay says $3.50. Okay. James, okay, let me get Jay up there. Okay. James says it's $3.78 in New York. Texas, pretty teens, $3.19. Okay. So we're seeing a fluctuation of prices. Grumpy says I'm paying $4.14 a gallon in Washington, but this was suspected because our governor passed a 60-cent fuel tax. Okay, thank you very much. We have Bert at $3.42, Costco, Colorado. Okay, thank you. Lisa in Ohio, $2.95 to $3.05. Okay, thank you, Deborah, for your input. Says Callie Heiser Rooster on stilts. Oh, that's awfully high. Thank you so much. Let's get back to it, guys.
You know, most people who answer these polls, it's 61% yes, 38% no. This is the banter back and forth, even as obviously the military operation is being characterized as being very successful, and we have markers on that. What's your thoughts about where we are right now and where we may be headed?
Well, the most important thing, Brett, and thank you for having me, but the most important thing is to recognize that Iran has been at war with us for at least 47 years, all the way from 1979. People may forget. They took our embassy hostage 444 days. They were responsible for the killings of 300 plus Marines in Lebanon in the early 1980s. And if you ask people about Iraq, what was the source of many of our casualties in Iraq, you'll get estimates as high as 75 or 80% of them were due to Iranian-made roadside bombs. And so they've been at war for us a long time. They also have developed the military capability to have reach outside of the boundaries of Iran, including Hezbollah and Hamas, which they both arm and equip and continue to arm and equip even after the events of the summer. And I myself negotiated 4 Security Council resolutions calling them a threat to international peace and security under Chapter 7, the strongest chapter of the UN Security Council resolutions, because of their nuclear ambitions. So to say that this regime was not a threat, I think is simply not, it's ahistorical. They have been a threat for a long time.
So there you have it, coming from Condoleezza Rice. This regime is a big threat to the world, the United States too.
You know, you can praise the military's action, its effectiveness, how precise it is, the amazing things we're seeing every day of the U.S. military and the Israeli military, for that matter, while still raising questions about how long is this going to last? Is it worth the blood and treasure that we're doing currently? You know, another poll.
Okay, so I want you guys to answer this question. Again, thank you to everybody that hit the like button, share, and subscribe. We do this every day at noon, our hot topics. Tell us if you think this conflict in Iran is necessary for the United States, especially if we go forward putting boots on the ground. So if you are for what's happening in the Middle East, put a 1 in the chat. If not, put a 2. Tell us how you feel.
The handling of Iran, does it make us safer, less safe? No difference. Less safe is at 51%. So there is this skittishness or skepticism out there, even if you're wholeheartedly supporting what the military is doing every day.
Well, because there is uncertainty with any military operation and what the aftermath might be. But I think if the goal of the administration is to render Iran incapable of using its military forces outside of its borders, of threatening our neighbors, our allies, of threatening our bases abroad, which we're seeing they are capable of doing.
Okay, so far, most of the answers are that people are against the action in Iran. Okay, thank you.
If it is trying to deny them a conventional umbrella for their nuclear ambitions, that is a worthy goal. Now, what comes after? People are, of course, concerned about that. But if you can render Iran essentially incapable of military action against us and against our allies, that's worthy. And I think what they're trying to do is to neuter Iran as a military power in the region. And by the way, the Iranians, who I think made a strategic blunder in attacking the Gulf states like the UAE or Kuwait or others, is demonstrating that it is its goal to be a destabilizing force in the Middle East. Yes, you can still be concerned about what may come after. You can still be concerned about the uncertainties of warfare, but to render this awful regime incapable of using its military power, that's a worthy goal.
There's, talk about not restricting what the military may or may not do going forward. You've obviously been through this with wars as National Security Advisor, as Secretary of State, the mission creep fear. Now there's talk and reports about the Kurds possibly arming the Iranian Kurds and being a force on the ground. Your thoughts about that, knowing all you know about that region?
Well, the one thing I don't know is the nature of these reports that we're hearing about Kurdish incursions, if you will, into Iranian territory. And we probably ought to be circumspect about making judgments about what that really means in terms of Kurdish activity. Is it independent Kurdish activity? Is it somehow coordinated Kurdish activity? We'll learn those things later. But it does speak to the complicated demographics of Iran, and we have to keep that in mind. The Iranian population includes a large Azeri population. It includes a large Kurdish population. Those populations have been all the Iranian people have been badly treated by their regime, but there have been a lot of suppressions of those ethnic groups. So we do have to be aware that Iran is not a homogeneous population. It's also a population of over 90 million people on territory that's twice the size of Texas. So it's going to be a complicated set of circumstances here.
They have over 1 million troops ready to go in Iran, so it could be quite the challenge.
We go forward.
Last thing, you've been in the halls of power, in the meetings behind closed doors. Talk about this decision by Commander-in-Chief to do what President Trump has done, and what that means big picture in the world looking at it.
Well, I think you have to see this as a series, really, of events, starting with October 7th, when Iran demonstrated that it probably wasn't possible to deter their tentacles like Hamas. I'm quite certain that October 7th and Hamas could not have happened without Iranian training.
Did you guys see all of the bombs that they're dropping in Israel from Iran, as well as what's obviously falling in Iran? But it's quite devastating if you see some of the videos. We're going to go through that tonight.
Training and equipment, maybe even planning. And then, of course, you had the events of June when the administration decided, along with the Israelis, to try and at least degrade and maybe even seriously set back.
So now we start to see why Donald Trump has brought her to the White House in the last few days, because she knows her history. As Susie says, very knowledgeable lady. She can definitely add a lot to what's happening to navigate this.
Iranian nuclear capabilities. In order to do that, they were able to suppress Iranian air defenses. And so Iran is in a sense, defenseless then. And then you see that the Iranians are rebuilding their nuclear capability, that they're rearming Hamas and Hezbollah, and that they are essentially at this moment defenseless. They won't always be defenseless. And so the decision is to really at this point take care of it and render them incapable of those activities. So
all right. So basically they want to neutralize the Iranian people at this point. So we'll keep our eyes and ears open to the new developments. But now we're going to see how Russia is actually playing a role in the background with Iran. And this could be a big issue too.
We had a chance to ask President Trump about a new superpower joining this fight on the Iranian side of Epic Fury.
President Trump, it sounds like the Russians are helping Iran target and attack Americans now.
That's an easy problem compared to what we're doing here. I mean, but can I be honest? It's just, I have a lot of respect for you. You've always been very nice to me. What a stupid question that is to be asking at this time. We're talking about something else. Can we keep this maybe a little bit?
And just a few minutes ago, the Iranians confirmed Russia is helping.
Are you receiving any help from Russia?
All right, so pay attention. Here's a key figure from Iran, and he's going to really lay it out for you.
Well, we have a strategic partnership with Russia.
So that's a yes?
And, well, a military cooperation between Iran and Russia is not something new. It's not a secret. It has been in the past, and it's still there and will continue in the future.
Guys, we have 700 people. Could you please hit the like button, share, and subscribe to help push the channel? We're on the road to the White House. In fact, I'll be at the White House this Friday, but I'm trying to get approved as a press individual. So that will be giving you some high-level news in the future, but I just need you to like, share, subscribe, help us to get the numbers on the table. Thank you.
General David Petraeus, retired four-star general. What should President Trump do about this?
Well, he should ask Congress to pass the sanctions bill that is in the Senate. Senator Lindsey Graham has led the effort, very close to President Trump, of course. He has over 90 out of 100 senators supporting it. It would be a very powerful signal to Russia.
And I just want to tell you guys, when I cover some of the events out at Nancy Guthrie, or when you see me cover the deposition for the Clintons, the mainstream, the big media, they get all up into their jumbles because of the fact they haven't really seen a lot of independent media. They sometimes try to corner us as YouTubers, but they're starting to see us elevate to a higher level, and it's quite fear-inspiring when you hear that mainstream media is like the Titanic that's slowly on its way out, right? When it's on its way out, those small boats, they look very important because of the state of what's happening in the world. People are going where the news appear to be more solid, right? So any chance you get to support independent media, myself and so many others, I would say try to do so, because the world is changing and you really need the boots on the ground, because when you're looking at any type of mainstream media, any type of news, you see that AI is mixed in. You can't even decipher. So a lot of times we go to the location, we turn on the live, not even a lot of words. We just show you what's happening, and therefore you can come to your own conclusion.
It would complement what the EU has done, which has been very impressive in this regard as well. And I think it's long since time that the sanctions are slapped on Russia, especially now that apparently they're providing the intelligence, which is so very important to the targeting that Iran does. They do not have the kind of intelligence that Russia.
Yes, Neon. Caroline mentioned drafting. So drafting is on the table. These are some perilous times, definitely.
Can share with them and is apparently, and that explains some of the accuracy of the missiles and the drone strikes.
And Epic Fury has been going on for more than a week. We've already seen a part of the Pentagon playbook that we've never seen before, the part where the U.S. has reverse engineered some of these lethal Iranian drones. Listen to this.
You used to always hear, we're shooting down a $50,000 drone with a $2 million missile. These days, we're spending a lot of time shooting down $100,000 drones with $10,000 weapons from ours. So that's one aspect of it. Lucas, indispensable. As many of you know, and if you don't know, this was an original Iranian drone design.
So the narrative was out that we're spending $1 million or $2 million or even $5 million just to take down some of these drones that the Iranian people can create for 25 to 50,000. But here he's kind of setting the pace. He's saying that actually it's costing the United States military something like $10,000 to shoot down a $25 to $50,000 drone. So that's much better than what we've been hearing. So whenever we hear certain things and we can correct it or add to the pot, it's one of the things we like to do here.
We captured it, pulled the guts out, sent it back to America, put a little Made America on it, brought it back here.
General, how often does the United States military reverse engineer a weapon to use it against the people who invented it?
Pretty rarely, I suspect. We've certainly taken weapons from different battlefields around the world and sorted out what they consist of, what the capabilities are, what their vulnerabilities are, so that we can develop weapons that can deal with those. You know, we famously brought tanks out, infantry fighting vehicles, others over the years.
So we definitely get the idea. You want to keep in mind that Russia is definitely backing, providing intelligence, as well as perhaps even many in the audience are saying weapons to Iran, but also China is in the mix too. So we have to factor that in, because if they get involved, it's a different type of scenario, I must say. But now we're going to see there's a rumor at the rumor mill. Perhaps you caught that rumor in the air, in the wind, that MAGA is having some sort of civil war because of the stance on what's happening in Iran. But let's take a look at it, see what's happening. A lot of times it's just fluff. But again, we want to take a look at it, folks.
In the middle of an absolute whirlwind of breaking news this evening, and it's showing no sign of letting up anytime soon. Just tonight, Iranian state media announced the son of the late Ayatollah Khamenei has been named as the country's new supreme leader. This comes as U.S. Central Command confirmed 2 more U.S. service members' deaths overseas. The Department of Defense just identified one of them as Major Sorfly Davius from Queens, New York. He died Friday in Kuwait as the result of a non-combat related incident, which is being.
So we want to have a moment of silence for the individuals that have lost their lives. Many people are saying that even though we hear numbers like 6 or 7 have been lost, that the numbers are way bigger than that, and we're not being told the exact truth. So we'll keep our eyes on that too, because that's very important. But we have here Major Davius, who lost his life, and definitely we feel sorry for the pain of the family. He was from New York, here in Queens. So definitely. And for those of you in the audience who have service members, tell us about it in the comment section.
Investigated. Major Davius also served with both the New York Police and Fire Department. That news comes one day after President Trump attended the dignified transfer for the first 6 fallen troops at Dover Air Force Base.
Thank you, Carol.
ABC News asked him today whether witnessing that solemn event gave him pause. Trump replied in part, quote, not at all. The parent said to me, please win this for my child. This comes as major cracks are starting to form in the Republican Party.
Did you guys hear what happened with Fox News? Donald Trump, when he attended the transition involving those that had lost their lives as service members. He had on a baseball cap, as they would say. That's the way they've coined it in the media. And so Fox were trying to do him a solid. So instead of posting the video of him with the white hat that was this year, they went back in the past and they showed where he didn't have a hat on, but they were caught with their hands in the jar. So they had to come back and kind of clean that up. But these are the type of discussions you see online. We're just tuning you into them.
Over the war. A recent NBC News poll found 77% of Republicans are overall supportive of Trump's strikes on Iran. That's a far cry from the universal support Trump has enjoyed in the party for years. That split is just as visible within right-wing media. Many top voices who backed Trump in 2024 are now coming out against the war. Watch.
Notice all the people that have turned their back on Donald Trump and MAGA. Just put that into your hat, too.
This is Israel's war. This is not the United States' war.
Bibi's not dumb. He would know how to talk Trump into it, which is clearly what he did.
The only reason it looks like we're in there is just because Israel needs it.
Yeah.
Right? And then naturally, Americans are furious about it.
Joining us now is former New York Congressman Max Rose, who's an Afghanistan war veteran and a senior advisor for Vote Vets, and Peter Beinart, MS Now political analyst and author of the Beinart Notebook on Substack. So, Max, going to start with you here. Is this a real split, given that Donald Trump campaigned on no new wars, America first? It was a big deal to his base. Is this going to actually splinter his base of support?
It's splintering it right now because Donald Trump very clearly lied to his voters, just like he lied to them that he was going to do something about the affordability crisis. What's shocking, though, is when we compare this to the war in Iraq 2 decades ago, where George Bush and the Republican Party maintained a powerful political base for several years. Of course, they went on to win the midterms in 2004, and he won re-election. But of course, then they only had one consistent lie for going to war. Now, just in a matter of 2 weeks, Trump and his cronies have like 5 different lies for why. The 10. First, it was the ballistic missiles program. Then it was the nuclear program that suddenly came back. Then it was the terrorism. Then it was the fact that Israel was going to do it with or without them. Then it was the fact that we don't just need world peace for ourselves, but also our grandchildren, and we have to bomb our way out of it. Then it was the fact that we need to provide the Iranian people with democracy, and the only way to do that is by carpet bombing them. Over lie after lie after lie, and it is clear even to the MAGA base.
I mean, I think it's pretty telling in the clip that you just played there, Elise, from Megyn there on her podcast, I think it was. I mean, she's talking to Eric Prince. Eric Prince?
I think
of all
Eric Prince
people.
is just
Guys, we have a lot of new people here. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Thanks.
jealous, though, because he hasn't been contracted yet.
Well, maybe that is it. But if you have Eric Prince saying that your war is a bad idea, I don't know.
Yeah, and Bolton.
I mean,
I mean, they're caught in this weird position, right? Because they're trying to attack the war without attacking Trump himself. And so what you see Megyn Kelly is saying is basically Trump is so stupid that Israel was able, or Netanyahu was able to talk him into the war. But it doesn't make any sense, right? It's Israel's war, and it's also America's war, right? Because Donald Trump decided to bring America into war, and he decided to allow Israel to attack Iran, because America could have stopped Israel if we wanted to, right? And so I think ultimately it's untenable for them to try to walk this line where they oppose the war without holding Trump responsible for the war.
Max, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries was asked earlier on Meet the Press whether he will vote to block additional funding for the war. Let's listen to that.
As the leader of House Democrats, do you plan to block all Pentagon funding, even if the argument is it is critical for military readiness?
Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it in terms of if the administration makes a request to Congress to consider additional funding.
What do you think Democrats should be doing here?
They should actually be able to separate this into 2 separate points. One, which I think we all would agree on, that when it comes to service members currently stationed in the Middle East, we should not leave them high and dry to fend for themselves with just their boots and their bottle of, their canteen of water. No one believes that. But you need to de-link that. You need to force this to be de-linked from the larger question of continued appropriations for an ongoing war that Congress has not had the opportunity to vote on, to approve or disapprove, an unconstitutional war that there's no...
I don't think Congress is really in the picture at this point, but that's just my opinion.
...proven justification for. That should be the Democrats' position on this.
So then why, from leadership to other members, are we seeing some Democrats kind of signal that they may well, in fact, be fine giving more money to this war effort?
I mean, I think the Democratic Party has really struggled to articulate a clear anti-war position. And I think we're seeing now that there's not only a gap between Republican elites and Republican voters, but between Democratic elites and Democratic voters. And you saw with both Schumer and Jeffries, they have kind of procedural critiques. They say Trump should have come to Congress. Of course he should have come to Congress, right? And they say Trump hasn't offered a plan. Yes, of course Trump hasn't offered a plan. But they're not willing to say the most obvious thing, which is that it's immoral and criminal for us to attack countries that don't threaten us, period. It doesn't matter how bad their regimes are, right? And because they can't say that clearly, I think they can't actually take advantage of the anti-war majority that exists in the country in both parties.
So what do you think is the animating ideology then behind the war, right? I mean, we know it from an Israeli perspective with Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been very clear about regime change, and for a variety of reasons, seeing Iran as an existential threat. Some people don't think that Iran was really an existential threat to Israel, and certainly it's not an existential threat to America. What do you think is the animating ideology behind why Donald Trump decided to go along with Netanyahu in this war?
I think Trump thought that the assassination of Soleimani worked for him politically. He thought that the 12-day war worked for him politically, and he thought that Venezuela worked for him politically. And I think, frankly, he loves the idea of blowing things up.
Okay, guys, so we're going to take a little pause here, and I want to hear from you. Do you think that this action is going to help Democrats win? If you think that Democrats are going to come back strong and take back over in politics, put a 1 in the chat if you think this is all going to play into the Democrats' hand. Put a 2 if you think no, and that if you believe that the Republicans this is making the Republican Party stronger. So 1 for Democrats, 2 for Republicans in the midterm elections. Let's see what the majority has to say, okay? We're just going to take a moment, get a feel, get a pulse, okay? What everybody is saying. We're down the middle at this point. Okay, 1 for Democrats, 2 for Republicans, and in regards to this action, this conflict that's happening in Iran. Okay, we even have a 3. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so keep expressing yourself. We're going to try to tally that up.
I think he enjoys cruelty, and I think he enjoys using this military as a toy, and he thinks it makes him look big and politically strong. He's not smart enough to understand that this is completely different, and because the foreign policy process is broken and it's a bunch of sycophants there, I don't think there were people who were willing, like Mattis would have in the first term, to say, Mr. President, this is a catastrophe, right? And so I think in that environment, Netanyahu, not only Netanyahu, but Netanyahu was one of the people who I think was able to play on Trump's idiocy and vanity to basically say this is going to be another victory for him.
Max, did you watch the dignified transfer yesterday? So 6 U.S. service members brought home it's barely been 24 hours. We now know about 2 more U.S. service members. 1, just tonight, we learned sort of a health-related incident while serving. Are these moments supposed to change a president when they watch young people? I mean, Sergeant Declan Cody, who came back yesterday, just 20 years old. 20 years old. I mean, that's almost a baby, in my view. I mean, you have your entire life ahead of you, and a whole family waiting to eat dinner with you and hang out with you. And it was entirely silent. For anyone who didn't watch it yesterday, you can't hear much as these events unfold. But that was sort of all that I was thinking about, was the hopes and dreams and expectations people have for all 6 of the people coming by, and wondering what's going through the president's mind as he sees them and he knows their families are waiting to receive them.
First of all, these young men and women in uniform are the absolute best that America has to offer, and all they wanted to do.
Okay, I think I've had enough of that for one day. Not solid enough. So anyway, we're going to move on. We'll keep our eyes on it. Toward the end of the show, I'm going to have an additional snippet from Tucker Carlson in regards to the whole breakdown of this Middle Eastern religious warfare. So if you want to check it out, you can. It's not that we're putting stock into it, but I thought it was quite intriguing. Now we're going to take a look at what happened in regards to Rihanna over the weekend. Someone shot at her home. We're going to take a look at that. Thank you.
Troubles at airports across the country. The partial government shutdown is on day 23, and tens of thousands of TSA agents are working without pay.
Some are starting to call out sick, leading to long security lines and ripple effects in other cities. Megan Spector joins us live from Sky Harbor Airport tonight with the very latest. Megan.
Yeah, well, the good news for travelers flying out of Sky Harbor, security lines have been moving smoothly throughout the day. In fact, right now, it's just a 9-minute wait time to get through security at Terminal 3, which is a huge difference from what other airports across the country are seeing. Entering its fourth week, the partial government shutdown is hitting travelers hard. Security lines are surging across major hubs like Houston, New Orleans, and Atlanta, with wait times stretching up to 3 hours.
When we walked in, we saw the giant Southwest line, and then realized that I guess there was a TSA staffing shortage, and we realized that we were going to miss our 2:40 flights.
Leading to missed flights and travel day delays.
We got a hotel room so that we would have a place to be for the next few hours, and now we're backtracking again to get on our 10:45 flight.
With this
So it looks like the airports have become a madhouse. When you add to that some of them have taken on threats, bomb threats and the liking, they have to be evacuated. Just imagine how that affects travel at this time.
shutdown, most TSA officers are working without pay. The results, a surge in workers calling out, creating staffing shortages and therefore long lines.
We're fed up. We had enough. This is the third shutdown in a matter of 6 months.
Jovan Petkovic has been with TSA for 10 plus years and is based out of Phoenix. He calls the shutdown a huge economic roller coaster.
Houston, Atlanta passengers, how many delays is it? How many flight attendants are being impacted by this because of their flights either being delayed or being canceled out? That means they're not getting paid if you're not sitting behind the controls as a pilot.
So it appears that right now is definitely not the time to travel, although I do understand that people have, they have to do what they have to do.
You're not getting the paycheck.
The Trump administration and DHS are pointing fingers at Democrats, saying this chaos is a result of their refusal to fund DHS. The Senate voted Thursday 51-45, failing to advance the legislation to end the partial shutdown.
This is a problem of policy, not personnel. The rot is deep. No one person can straighten this up until the president changes the whole agency, stops the violence, and reins in.
So everybody is pointing fingers at the president of the United States, Donald Trump. What will this mean going forward politically for him? Especially, we keep hearing all of these reports that his polls are going down. But do people really support Trump? I think a lot of people do. However, they don't want to say it out in public.
Ice.
Despite long TSA lines elsewhere, Sky Harbor security lines appear to be running smoothly, and travelers we spoke with flying into Phoenix said they didn't notice anything out of the ordinary.
Not at all. Nope. Super easy.
It was very easy. Yeah, we left from SFO and no lines. We got right on the airplane, right through TSA. Very simple.
It was a long line, but it only took me about 10 minutes.
But it's unclear how long the partial.
So on top of all of this happening in the airports and travel, we also have here in New York all sorts of threats when it comes to bombs, explosive devices. We had an issue over the weekend just as well. I'm going to show you how this affected the new mayor of New York.
New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani and the city's police commissioner will hold a press conference this morning about the incident over the weekend where improvised explosive devices were thrown during rival protests outside the city's official mayoral residence. Mamdani, the city's first Muslim mayor, denounced the violence and bigotry. Jerika Duncan joins us now with more from outside Gracie Mansion in New York. Jerika, good morning.
Good morning. That scuffle happening right out in front behind me, or right here, I should say, in this area near 88th Street in New York City. And it did not last long. Officials, though, now investigating possibly federal charges on the way.
Guys, you should check out Jerika. I know her quite well. We've covered various cases together in New York City, but she is very well spoken. She's with CBS, I believe, and she does a great job. So check her out, find her social media, and follow her great reporting.
Protesters and counter-protesters of an anti-Islam rally clashed on New York City streets outside Gracie Mansion Saturday. Police allege 18-year-old Amir Balat threw an improvised explosive device into the crowd. You can then see him grab what may be a second device from 19-year-old Ibrahim Kayumi. Balat appears to try and light it before police chased him down the street, tackled Balat, and handcuffed him. Neither device exploded. Police also arrested Kayumi. Investigators are now looking into.
So this is just a regular day in New York City. After all that's happening around the world, people are trying to express themselves locally, but I can imagine he could see some hard time for throwing this explosive device, even though it did not go off. And yes, Lisa, Jerika Duncan, she's very good at what she does.
Whether they were inspired by ISIS extremist messaging.
The devices appear to be a jar wrapped in black tape along with a hobby fuse.
On Sunday, a third suspicious device was found in connection with the investigation. The original anti-Islam protest was organized by far-right influencer Jake Lang, a January 6 insurrectionist who was granted clemency by President Trump. Mayor Zoran Mamdani, who is Muslim, said white supremacist Jake Lang organized a protest outside Gracie Mansion rooted in bigotry and racism. What followed, he said, was even more disturbing. CBS News law enforcement contributor Richard Esposito.
They will work, CIA is in there, they'll work hard now to take apart who else these people might be connected to, and in the longer term sense, are there people we need to watch?
A lot of the young people don't have a lot of resources, but we see them taking steps to try to express themselves, and we may not agree with it, but people are really fed up and pushing back, even while putting other people's lives in danger. Let's take a look at what Barack Obama, our former president, he has a grand opening coming. We're going to check it out.
We need to look around right now and feel like the challenges we face are simply too big. But hope is not about ignoring the hard stuff. It is that thing inside us that insists something better awaits if we're willing to work for it. Here on the south side of Chicago, hope is getting a permanent home. Starting on June 19th, you can visit the Obama Presidential Center, a campus with a world-class museum.
So the Obama Presidential Center, all right.
A new branch of the Chicago Public Library. Sweeping green spaces filled with public art, yes, a basketball court, and more. This is a place where a child from next door or across the globe can sit behind the Resolute desk and imagine how they could help create a better world. All week long, we'll honor all the people who've been with us on this journey, from those who helped launch our campaign, served in my administrations, and helped build the center, to all of you who want to turn hope into action. This is not a monument to the past. It's a living destination for people who refuse to accept the status quo. If you feel that way, this is your invitation to join us. Sign up to be the first to know about updates, events, and tickets at obama.org.
Okay, so there you have it. That'll be opening. I'll definitely go out there and cover it so we could have boots on the ground to see what's happening in regards to this. Now we're going to cover Nancy Guthrie to see if there's any updates in regards to her case as well.
Day 36 in the search for Nancy Guthrie.
Day 36, folks. What happened to Nancy Guthrie? Have you been following that case? Tell us if you really are attached to this case, or tell us, well, you don't really follow it at all.
The 84-year-old mother of Today Show co-host Savannah Guthrie was reported missing 5 weeks ago today. And today, the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed to News 4 Tucson that they are aware of a damaged utility box near Nancy's home, a little more than a half a mile away. A PCSD spokesperson tells us tonight it is being reviewed as part of the investigation. Detectives are still searching for the suspect in that video that we have shown you lots of times over the last few weeks. That is that man in the ski mask and gloves, appearing to carry a gun at his waist and wearing that Ozark Trail hiker pack. Investigators still reviewing home surveillance video from the night Nancy was abducted. Investigators now asking neighbors if they had issues with their internet the night of January 31st into the morning of February 1st. Detectives may be looking into whether the suspect used a high-tech device known as a Wi-Fi jammer to scramble security cameras. Now, if you have any information that can help detectives here in this case, call 1-800-CALL.
You know, tampering with the electrical box and having a Wi-Fi internet jammer of some sort, not being able to be found by the police in all of this time, the FBI. Do we really want to consider this person as an amateur? Perhaps this is a high tech. Maybe this is superior organized crime. Maybe there's a bit of intelligence when it comes to this particular case. And typically, I think what's confusing is that a typical 84-year-old woman, right, her risk level would probably be very low, maybe going to bingo, going to church, something of the sort. And so you typically look into that circle to see perhaps who may have been involved. But the fact that her daughter was one of the most prominent voices for morning television, well, that puts her risk level through the roof. And also, her daughter would have her come to the station and also give a nice presentation right there in the studio. And who knows who really targeted Nancy Guthrie, or could it have been more about the daughter and she was just collateral damage? All of this we do not know, but it does give us an opportunity to look at all of the different parameters in regards to this case, especially when you look at the fact that if you just envision the person that's walking up. I was looking last night. It often looks like a guy that's probably no more, maybe even a teenager, just the way the person is moving themselves. If you go back and look at the video, it just seems like a young person. They don't seem to be sluggish or overweight. You don't see a belly, which is kind of typical person as they age. So could this have been just a random burglar, or could this have been something at a high level? Remember, we've heard things all the way to the Epstein files, perhaps because she was interviewing some of the victims. Well, this could be at that level. And then some say it could have been other countries involved. All of that and more, people are just trying to figure it out. And we may, the way this is going, we might not ever have a solid answer. We can't even get a straight answer from the sheriff, because the sheriff, as we see now, there's a voluntary group that's fully equipped with all of the right tools to go out and search for Nancy. And guess what? They can't even get a straight answer from the sheriff to go out and do a search, right? So we have to wonder, what is all of this about? Even when it comes to this case, you won't believe it, folks, but a lot of people are saying maybe it has something to do with the president, a Donald Trump supporter. We see all of these variables and conclusions that people are trying to somehow fit into the mix, but we don't have any direction when it comes to the authorities. Typically in New York, I covered a case of Luigi Mangione, and I've been in court for Luigi Mangione. I actually sit right behind him for the state case and also for his federal case. They show us in court all of the video. Once Brian Thompson was shot right there in the streets of New York City, they were able to backtrack Luigi all the way to when he came into New York City and all the way until when he left. So that's how much camera systems that they have in place to try to figure out. Now, New York is much bigger, higher scale. But again, we wonder why in Tucson, Arizona, they don't have these type of resources. Well, last week when we covered the press conference, the sheriff actually tell you several times, right? That's why it lends me to start believing that maybe this has a local element to it, because the sheriff is saying, listen, we recently asked for better AI and technology when it comes to the camera systems, because they do have a lot of intersections. I counted about 5 different intersection access points to really get away from her home. And the cameras are there, but the sheriff actually says, well, I asked for this, but they told us no. And he actually says in the press conference, I'm not trying to make this political, right? He keeps saying that. So there's a local element there of frustration. Could someone have done this as a pushback to show that we need surveillance? Now, we don't know, but that's why we're asking these type of questions. At the level that this has been performed, could the person, because we have to wonder, why does the person have the gun, right? The weapon in their midsection? That's typically not where someone would carry a weapon. Number one, it would be a safety hazard for yourself, right? Because sometimes guns go off. Does that show that the person was very inexperienced? Or could it have been a person that has some law background, maybe a former disgruntled police officer, maybe someone that's upset with the local law enforcement there? And so to throw people off, they put the gun in a place where they're trying to appear to be more of an amateur. All of these type of ideas and questions many people have, but at this point, that's all it is, because we don't have a clue. We don't know why something like this could have happened, because when you look at the statistics in the United States, period, for women or men that are over 80 years of age, when you look at the broad numbers, it's less than 1% when someone at that age level is actually kidnapped. So then when you go to Tucson, Arizona, and you look at the numbers and you go back in time, it's just not found. They don't even have cases of individuals so readily kidnapped at that age. But when we look at the press conference, the sheriff says in the very first press conference while he's standing in her yard, he says that he called in the homicide unit, and he says because this was a crime scene. The very next day, the sheriff actually called off the search and he turned over the property back to the family. So is that indicative that the sheriff actually saw this as being more of a homicide where the body was taken? Or is he seeing it as a kidnapping that they feel like led to a homicide? Like, what's really happening there? Or could it have been that she was kidnapped, but because they saw the blood trail at the front area, right, that led him to take these steps and calling in the homicide units? That's not typical. Something seems a little bit off in the way that this property was handed back over to the family the next day. In fact, because it was handed back over to the family, one of the other news outlets, their anchor or reporter was able to walk up and actually take a video of the blood spills that were leading away from the property. And after that happened, then you see in the next press conference, the sheriff actually comes out and he starts to say, oh yeah, there's blood. So now he starts talking about the blood. In the first two press conferences, he wouldn't dare mention that there was blood on the scene. And actually, when I was boots on the ground, one of the sheriffs just mentioned to me, and I don't want to put out too much information, but there was some sort of blood within the door equal to what was outside. Well, we don't know officially because we haven't heard it in the media, but all of this we have to wonder about in regards to this case, like what's really happening and why, when it comes to this case, a lot of the independent journalists, such as myself, we were getting all this pushback from mainstream media. And then even the neighbors, we would be out there and they would come along in their bicycles and they'd say, hey, listen, you guys need to get out of here. There's people going missing. So many people go missing every day in the world, in the United States. Why are you just all around this one house? So at a broad scale, why are people pushing back on this case? What is it that's missing, and does that mean something? So we keep this all in mind as we cover the Nancy Guthrie case. I want to end out today. This is technically going to end the show here, but for those who want to stick around, and this is in no way to push the agenda of Tucker Carlson, but again, I like the way he breaks down the history about religion. And that's what we're going to focus on here as I present this video to you. And you'll start to understand why in 2026, people are still fighting over land. And the reason why they're fighting over land is because in the Bible, when you go back to Israel, right? When you go back to Israel, it was all about the promised land, right? They were all, God had promised the Israelites that they would have this promised land. But in order to get the promised land, they had to live a certain way and have a certain lifestyle. And because of, if you follow the Greek scriptures, when Jesus came along, right, the whole concept of Jesus, well, in that narrative, is actually the Israel, the Jews that actually, when Pilate is saying, listen, you have two men here that we could free up one of them, right, as a scapegoat, so to speak. Do you want me to release Jesus or Barabbas? The Jews said, let Barabbas go and kill Jesus. And basically they tell, and this is in the narrative, right? So then you have to wonder who's responsible for the Greek scriptures. But in that narrative, right, they say, let Jesus' blood be upon us and our children. So in that narrative is being written that the Jews would take Jesus' blood upon them, his death upon them, as though they're losing God's favor. And that's the part that a lot of people don't quite understand, because they just understand the Bible from a very slight standpoint. But in the Hebrew scriptures, the Israelites are definitely God's chosen people. Now, the reason today in this video is going to be very helpful, because, well, we say, well, why are we bringing this up? We're bringing it up because it helps us to understand the big picture, that even with Islam, it's about land. With the Israelites, it's about land. And this is happening today. And when you listen and you really ask these very important questions as to why are we sending our troops over to Iran, I guarantee you it's all stemming back to what? All stemming back to land. And the Israelites need to be able to build their temple. That's a part of the prophecy, that they would be able to build this third temple. And guess who's occupying the area where they need to build the temple? So you see how this is all working? They're trying to fulfill Bible prophecy, and a lot of them are just trying to make it work in their own timing. It doesn't really necessarily have to be a script from a God. They're just trying to push a narrative. So I say all of this to introduce this video, where you have to understand the history, and you'll start to realize this is not a 2026 conflict. This is more of a biblical ideology that men are still trying to follow and become realized after 3,000 years. Let's check it out.
Are key players involved in this war, the one happening tonight, who believe that what we're seeing.
Now, here's a key point, right? I want you guys to understand when it comes to, and this is nothing negative about Israel or any religion. I'm just giving you the facts that you could actually go look up yourself. But if you're not a Jew or of Israel, then you're a Goyim, or you're a Gentile. And you can pick that up also in the Hebrew scriptures and also in the Greek scriptures. I'm not talking about the Quran. I'm just speaking from the Bible reference point. Most of us that are here today listening to this, we fall into the Gentile category, right? So we're not in the favored cup, right? Unless you go and you take the proper steps in order to become an actual Jew, Israelite, what have you. Okay, so that's very important to keep in mind. And if you're not in the selected, in the anointed group, right, then there's a whole set of parameters that come under your head, right, and under your family, because you were not chosen by God to be in this special group, this special category. So if we go boots on the ground in Iran, it's actually going to be the Gentiles, right? A lot of the Gentiles going to fight for Israel. That's the narrative that all of this is being pushed. I'm just trying to help you understand a little bit of it.
on our television screens and on Twitter will usher in a series of events that begin with the destruction of the Dome in the Rock, Aqsa Mosque, and then the rebuilding of the Third Temple, after which the world will end. God will come back. And they mean it. And by they, we mean literally some of the guys fighting the war. So you may have read reports today that commanders in the field of American troops, a lot of them, and who knows if this is true, but it's out there, told their troops on the eve of the outbreak of this war that we're doing this for Jesus, because it is Jesus's will that we do this, and that by doing it, we will usher in a series of events that bring about the end of history, the end of time, Armageddon, the last days. It's hard to believe that's true, especially since, by the way, there are 1 million Christians in Iran. So if you were doing this for Jesus, presumably you would go out of your way not to hurt his followers in the country you're attacking. Did the U.S. government or any government make any attempt to spare the Christians? Are we making an attempt tonight? Of course we're not. And of course, when the smoke clears, ultimately we will find out, just a guess, that Christians suffered disproportionately in this, as they do all wars, from the Iraq War to the bombing of Nagasaki, the seat of the Christian church in Japan, et cetera, et cetera. Christians have a way of dying disproportionately in these wars, which tells you something about their real motive. But in any case, there was a spate of stories suggesting that U.S. commanders told their...
So really, you're trying to live your life, you're trying to raise your family, all of these peaceful ideas, but you have to understand that when it goes back to the books, especially the Bible and also the Quran, a lot of the belief systems, the end of the story before it gets better is a lot of doom and gloom. In fact, you'll have people knocking on your door or teaching about this Armageddon. So these are the concepts that people are actually looking forward to, because they feel that after these very tough moments, then they will either go to heaven or live forever on paradise. But that's why a lot of these religions are so strong and the ideology is so out there that they don't mind giving their lives, and sometimes you see, like even with 9/11, people are willing to die for the cause. Like, how in the world can you deal with a person where you're trying to fight and they're trying to take both you and them out? It's almost like there's no happy ending to that. You follow?
Troops, they were doing this for some weird anti-Christian reason, posing as Christianity. But it's not just the U.S. side. Here's an IDF soldier, apparently an American by his accent, describing why he's at war. Watch this.
They call this operation the Swords of Iron. But what are we really fighting for? We're fighting for the right of the Jewish people to exist, be Jewish, practice their religion, and be free. And one day our true leader will come and we'll be united as a whole Jewish nation so we can rebuild the Beit HaMikdash.
Beit HaMikdash, probably mispronouncing it. That's the Hebrew term for the temple, the third temple. We are doing this so we can rebuild the temple. Now, you'll notice he's pulling off patches on Velcro on his IDF uniform. These are not civilian clothes. This is...
You hear that? To rebuild the temple that I mentioned. And guess where the temple is going to be built? It's going to be built in the promised land, right? On the Holy Land. It all goes back to Bible prophecy 3,000 years ago or better.
The uniform of the government of Israel, of its military. And he has patches on that uniform, one of which is a symbol of the temple, the third temple. So it just couldn't be clearer. Why are we doing this? To rebuild the third temple. Now, if you think we're just cherry picking this off the internet, one guy wearing an unauthorized temple patch, paid for, by the way, a uniform paid by us, armaments paid for by us, the U.S. taxpayer pays for all this stuff one way or another. The U.S. taxpayer pays for the military of Israel. Boy, does it. If you think we're being unfair and just like found one guy, well, here's a bunch of guys. It took us about 2 minutes on the internet to find this today. Here is a selection of IDF soldiers. Let's put it on the screen. There you go. And all of them have the same patch. Look familiar. Look carefully at that. What is that? That's the temple. That is the third temple. And we'll get to in a minute about how this might actually happen and what it would mean for the rest of the world. And just to be clear, these are conversations that most Americans, certainly me included, never wanted to have. Everybody's religious beliefs, sincere religious beliefs, when held up to the light of the rational world, to the man-made world, seem a little spooky and crazy, which is one of the reasons that in the culture some of us grew up in, we don't talk about them in public because they're personal. They're the most personal part of a person. So it is without judgment, by the way, that we're airing this, okay? Just describing it because it is significant to the future of the world, to the future of this war, and to our future as Americans. So how exactly did the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, a military that the U.S. taxpayer pays for, that lots of wealthy Americans send money to friends of the IDF, how did all these guys wind up wearing patches suggesting the point of this war was the destruction of one of the holiest places in Islam and the rebuilding of a temple that is totally anathema to Christianity? Like, how did this happen? Well, there are a lot of ways it happened. The main way it happened is because no one in the United States noticed, because it's such a secular place. And as noted, we have eyes but can't see and ears and can't hear. But this has been going on a long time in public through, in part, the efforts of a group called Chabad, C-H-A-B-A-D. And you may know people who give money to Chabad or run into Chabad, super nice people, engaged in all kinds of charitable activities, drug rehab. There's a lot about Chabad that's really good. But what is Chabad exactly? Well, Chabad, you can look it up, is a very old organization, about 200.
Guys, we understand your frustration or your expressions, but please do not spam the chat. Let's give everybody an opportunity to express themselves.
50 years old.
And by the way, hit the like button, share, subscribe as we go through this very important information to understand why some of the things are happening in the world. Please do not spam the chat. Moderators, please, if you could help with the spamming.
And it's a branch of Hasidic Judaism. It's an organization that was overseen for many years by a guy called Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, who was famously in Brooklyn, considered the Messiah by some of his followers, who was a friend of presidents, or certainly someone presidents visited. He was a very powerful man in the Orthodox and the Hasidic community. And he was the overseer of Chabad, which predated him and outlasted him, but he was its most visible ambassador. And Chabad has been pushing in a pretty subtle way, unless you look carefully, for the reconstruction of the Third Temple. And it seems like, from the reading we did recently, that those patches actually came from Chabad. Well, in any case, Chabad is pushing for the building of the Third Temple. But it's not just Hasidic groups from Brooklyn, and it's not just IDF soldiers. There are, amazingly, a lot of American evangelical leaders, Christian Zionists, whose main point is rebuilding the Third Temple. Now, how could an American Christian or any Christian call for the building of a temple whose inherent presence denies Christ? Who said clearly, and Christians believe this, it's a core point.
So let's just set the stage. The original first temple was destroyed roughly around, I believe it was 586, 587 BCE, when the Jews went into captivity. So then in the Greek scriptures, when you get from Matthew to Revelation, in the Gospels, when you have Jesus, and I believe it's Mark chapter 13, and also in Matthew chapter 14, right? Jesus, one of the followers, they say to Jesus, one of his disciples says, look at this building, how grand it is. And Jesus says, there are days coming when not one stone will be left upon a stone for this temple. And he's talking about the temple in Jerusalem. And roughly after Jesus, which most Bible scholars feel like around 33 CE, he would have died, if the story is true. Okay, I just want to say that. I do realize not everybody believe. But in 70 CE is when the temple, according to Josephus, the historian, is when that temple in Jerusalem actually fell in accordance to what would have been a prophecy by Jesus in Matthew chapter 13. Now, most mainstream Bible scholars, that's how they date when the book of Mark was written, because the book of Mark is written after the fall of the temple in 70 CE. So Bible scholars say that the first gospel out of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that Mark was the first one written. It was written after 70 CE, so it's not more of a prophecy, but they're saying it's being written into a story. Recently, when I went to Rome, one of the key facts that I appreciated from one of the tour guides, they said that history is written by the winners, right? History is written by the winners. And these historians, when they write the story, they write it in favor of their people, in favor of their belief systems. It's no different than when slaves came to America. Whoever wrote these stories, you would just have to take it on faith that they actually wrote the real story. And that's why so many people in life, they become displaced because they don't know their real history. And so that's why when we focus on the book of Mark, they said it was written around 70. So in 70 CE, this temple, which would have been the second temple, was destroyed, right, by the Romans. And then you have the Jews that were dispersed across the world, as they would say, although there's some debates about that, but that's the general consensus that the Jews in 70 CE were displaced again. And that's why you'll find that in many countries that you go, even in Rome today, when I went there, they have what you call the ghettos. That's where the Jews typically live, which is not far from the Roman Colosseum, right? And even spread about through Italy and even through Greece. And that's why I'm going to Egypt pretty soon to continue with this education process. But at any rate, so when he's talking about the first and second temple, you have the first one, 586, destroyed 70 CE. The second temple, right, is destroyed. You still have the Weeping Wall there. If you want to do some research, you can go back and check out Herod the Great and kind of understand what this is all about. And I don't think people realize the history on the Weeping Wall, but that's a different factor. So now, according to the original prophecy involving the Jews, the Israelites, they would have this temple that would rise up and be built by the Messiah, right? And that's why your typical Jews do not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. They felt that he was just a prophet. So all of this could help you understand how we get to this third temple that Tucker Carlson is talking about.
Faith, I am the temple. You want to speak to God, you speak through me. That's Christianity. That's the whole religion right there. So if you're a Christian preacher calling for the rebuilding of the third temple, you kind of missed the whole point. That's more than apostasy. That's like not even knowing what the religion's about. So it's hard to believe there could be any ordained Christian leaders pushing for the rebuilding of the third temple. Oh, but there are a lot. There are a lot. And here's just one. This is Pastor Greg Locke. Listen to this.
The Gaza Strip, which has now been cut off by Israel, and rightly so. They should have cut them off a long time ago. Now, I don't care how insensitive you think I am to that. There's 6 doors in this church. You can leave anytime you want to. They've cut them off, electricity. They've cut off their water. They should have. Now, listen, I'm not for hurting anyone that's innocent. But anybody that supports terrorism is not innocent. You understand that? Israel should make the Gaza Strip a parking lot by this time next week. Destroy the whole thing. What they ought to do is evacuate up there on the hill and get a great big missile and blow that wicked Dome of the Rock plumb off of the spot where it's standing right now, so we can get that third temple rebuilt and usher in the coming of Jesus.
Boy, it is embarrassing and shameful as an American Christian to hear that and to know that video is from a few years ago. It's been on the internet. No one bothered to highlight it. Most people weren't even aware this was going on. Oh, it's definitely going on. These are very common views. Seems obvious that Mike Huckabee has them, that a lot of the Christian Zionists, John Hagee, that you think just like Israel. They just like Israel a lot. No. These are clerics, so their lives are informed by their religious views. What are their religious views? Well, you just heard it right there from Pastor Locke, who's quite a prominent Christian Zionist. He's not some lone wacko. And there he is with an Israeli flag waving behind him, casual calls for genocidal violence, just blow it up, make it a parking lot. Well, 2 million people live there. What happens to them? They're terrorist sympathizers. That right there is the tell. This is not Christianity. Imagine Jesus saying, just kill them all. They're terrorists. Is there anything in the gospel that suggests Jesus believed that? No, there's a lot to suggest, in fact, to tell us in very clear terms. He thought the opposite, of course.
Okay, guys. So I just want to give you an understanding of what he's trying to say from a different reference point. In order for, and keep in mind, that was a pastor saying they need to just wipe out Gaza, right? When you think about that, they're not doing it peacefully, right? It also affects the adults. It also affects the children, right? So the Christianity, which I won't get into the whole concept of who actually wrote the Greek scriptures, right, versus what you learn in the Hebrew scriptures. Now, there's a big difference. In the Hebrew scriptures, the God of the Hebrew scriptures is explaining that when you go in and you take a place, it says, dash the little babies to pieces. If you really want to know it, I could pull up the scripture for you. That's what they're being told. They have different guidelines when it comes to slavery. Also, if a woman is violated, she would have to marry her violator. All of these different concepts we find in the Hebrew scriptures. In the Greek scriptures, right, Jesus comes along and he's teaching something quite different than what you'll find in the Hebrew scriptures. In fact, if you go to Mark chapter 10, it tells you anybody laying a hand on the small children, you're going to be doomed. That's much different than what you learned in the Hebrew scriptures from Genesis to Malachi. So also in Matthew, it tells you the same thing. It says anyone doing anything to a child, to a baby, it would be better off for them to put a noose around their neck and cast it into the sea. So under that concept, which we understand is written by the gospel writers, they're telling you something completely different. And Jesus is talking about loving your neighbor as you do yourself. Right? Is that the spirit of what we're seeing here from that pastor that he just showed the video from? No, it's quite different. So you can't just go out wiping out people. In fact, in the scriptures, in the Greek scriptures, it talks about how you will learn war. You won't learn war anymore. You'll be turned. Also, I could just go through a whole vast ideology that's from the Greek scriptures, from Christianity, that's teaching about love in a different way of getting along. And if your neighbor comes to you, even in the middle of the night, asking for bread, you're not going to give them a scorpion, right? Or you're not going to give them a stone. All of these different concepts are quite different than what we see today that's happening on the world scene. But these things that are happening on the world scene, they're being done in the name of God, in the name of, I wouldn't say love, but you can't mix the two. And a lot of people don't quite understand if the original Israel that's in the Bible, because see now, if you walk down the streets of New York City, you'll see Hebrew Israelites. They say, well, we're the original Hebrew Israelites, okay? But then you have the different Jews throughout the world, and they say that we're the chosen ones. So it gets to be very confusing. But I showed you the video recently where Ted basically said because of his viewpoint of the Bible and the ancient Israelites, when he sits before the committee, when he sits as before Congress, he makes his modern day decisions because the Bible says whoever blesses Israel will be blessed. Whoever curses Israel will be cursed. So they're making decisions in 2026 based on Bible texts that were written 3,000 years ago. And that's how we get here when you start to understand the bigger picture of what Tucker Carlson is trying to say. All of them are trying to get back to this temple that's a part of the Bible prophecy. But yet Jesus is talking about a whole different way. And then I could actually break it down how the Apostle Paul is telling you something a little different even than what Jesus is saying. So all of this is all together lined up in the Bible, but most people don't read it enough to understand the different ideology of the individuals.
But the last part, let's build the third temple and bring about the return of Jesus, is a direct contradiction of core Christian theology. And even people without theology degrees who didn't go to some eminent Bible college can tell you, what? Jesus says, I am the temple. That is not Christianity. It's not even a close facsimile of Christianity. It's clearly evil. And it is, in some sense, the driving force behind the efforts to rebuild the third temple. Julian the Apostate, who was the last guy to try it, who died invading Iran, he was not Jewish. He was a pagan, just like Pastor Locke. But for some reason, he was the instrument of trying to do this. And there are many of these people, and not just in the theological realm, in the political realm. And that's relevant to you, whether you believe in God or not, or interested in the history of the Abrahamic faiths or not. Global leaders believe this. People you wouldn't expect, and you wonder, what is going on here? It's enough to make the hair on your arms go up. Did everyone know there was an effort to rebuild the third temple and the foundation stone except me? I can't believe I was left out of this conversation. No, all of us took place in public. And if we'd been paying attention or been tuned into that frequency, the spiritual frequency, we've been spiritually sensitive enough to pay attention, we would have known this. But of course, when you grow up in a materialist culture, when the only things you believe are real are the things that can be measured or purchased on Amazon, you tend to miss a lot. And we missed this. Inflation makes credit card statements particularly scary. You work 40, 50.
Okay, guys, so that's it. There you have it from Tucker Carlson giving a little history lesson on how all of this history ties into what we actually see today. And that's a key point here, something that we want to keep in mind. And a lot of this, the American people who do not believe actually in the same faith as those whom we might be fighting for, that's something to think about. Let's go through a few of the comments here. One Love says, Heath Tucker is complicit in it all. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Good point. I can understand that. Anthony says, wait until it comes to you. What is it? Tell us, Anthony. Tell us what is it. Okay, we have an update from the Alexander brothers. I've been covering that case as well in court with them, and they were actually deliberating. So let's see. James says, Mel, side note in the Alexander brothers' first note from the jury. Jurors sought clarification on whether inducement through a third party satisfies the travel charge. Okay. That's very similar to the Sean Diddy Combs case. Some very unique questions were coming in from the jury. So thank you very much, James. We look forward to having you on the show. It's going to be great. Let's definitely have that discussion. Send me an email and we'll work out the details. American says, my God is not a cruel God and does not justify murder unless it's defense for survival. Okay, thank you. Tell us who your God is, because we know there's so many different gods, depending on what religion people are a part of. One Love says Zionists are not real Jews. Okay, thank you for your comment. Thank you. The New Gent says people love taking everything out of context. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Let's see if we can get some new names here. Okay, American says, good versus evil. Surviving is the only good comes of it. Got to get this. Factions won't do it. Human race is all there is. Okay, thank you for that. Dial says this is a new covenant. Okay, all right, thank you for that. Dial says Iran is full of Christians too, largest growing population. Okay. Well, they're in dire straits right now, especially if the United States go in. This war is going to be a one for the books, I believe. We're starting to see something different here, but hopefully this all works itself out, but it looks like this could be something major. Okay, thank you. I'll try to take a few more comments. Guys, hit the like button, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in today to our News at Noon. We kind of went a little bit off in our second half of it, trying to break down this video from Tucker Carlson, which just gives you a little bit of history on the background of how the ideology all came into play. Let's see. Anthony says we need to stay strong enough to defend ourselves. Okay. I want to thank you to all the moderators who do such a great job here at Watching the World. There's a lot happening in the comment section, so it's nice to see that you guys are so attentive to the needs of everybody that's here trying to express themselves and participate. It's amazing. Okay, let's see. We have some new comments coming in. Let's see. Pixel says, this will be Trump's Vietnam. Okay. I don't see Trump as a long-time war type of individual, but this could be something different. But he doesn't appear to be a person that's big on war. Okay, let's see here. I think that's it for today. All right, let's see. Dal says the Quran, chapter 19, explicitly describes Mary as having a miraculous virginal conception through divine intervention. Okay, we also get that same concept at the beginning of Matthew chapter 1, and also in Luke chapter 1, we get the same concept. So thank you for that comment. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Pixel says he doesn't appear to be big on war. Okay, seems like an agreement, perhaps. Okay, Stella says, let's get to 150 likes, folks. That's amazing. We have close to 500 people here. And we had quite the discussion today about the hot topics pressing in the news, but also we had a chance to talk about Iran and what's happening. So if you came in late, you might want to go back and check it out. Anthony says, the enemy that threatens to kidnap your brother. Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see what else is happening here. Stella says, double tap the screen or press the thumbs up at the top of the screen to like the show. All right. We appreciate everybody who do that. Anthony says, let's see. Let me get to these comments. Anthony says, if a big white guy is holding Pocahontas and you catch him and he threatens to get your little brother if you help her. Okay. I'm not sure. I didn't quite understand the whole tie-in, but I'm here to listen. Okay, Mitch says Russia has been in their own war for 4 years, and Russia was worth anything. That war would have been over a long time ago. They ain't gonna do nothing. Hell, they're probably just about out of weapons. I often wonder about Russia and what's really happening. One Love says, great discussion, Mel. Okay, nice to see you, One Love. Okay, let's see here. And we have Honeybee. Nice to see you, Honeybee. Always a pleasure. Anthony says, because the enemy doesn't give up. All right. You talking about the devil? Is that what you're talking about when you say the enemy? Or are you talking about the enemy of the United States? Could you just break it down for us a little bit? Anthony says, and it keeps its word. You must be talking about maybe the Bible. I'm having to guess here, so let's try. Okay, so according to Stella, we just need 15 more likes to get to 150. I think that would be a record. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so we're going to see you guys back tonight at 8 p.m. And tomorrow we'll have our first morning show. I'll be introducing you guys to Miss Knockout tonight, but we're going to have a very nice morning show that's going to talk about pretty much everything. Typically, we cover politics and current events, but now we're going to have a morning show that you'll hear about whatever's happening through the night, just so you can get your day off to a great start. So it could be sports, it could be politics, it could be gossip, whatever comes to mind, just for the morning show, a little bit different than what we typically do. So you'll be able to wake up in the morning with the wake up crew. It'll be an amazing thing for you. Matrix says Russia has not used any nuclear bombs. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Let's see here. Anthony says the enemy has never failed. Okay. We need 14 more likes according to One Love. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. How Hot. Nice to see you. Go Team America. America first. All right. That's the motto. All right. One Love says it's free to like. Try it. Okay. All right, guys. So thank you for tuning in today. I think we had a great show. We even talked about Nancy Guthrie. Before we leave out, I just wanted to try to get an understanding because I'm not sure how many people here actually follow the whole Nancy Guthrie case. But if you have been following the case, put a 1 in the chat. If you're unfamiliar with Nancy Guthrie, put a 2 in the chat. Let's just get a feel for it to see how common this case is to the average person, at least tuning in to Watching the World. Put a 1 in the chat if you're familiar with the case. Put a 2 if not. Let's see. Okay. So thank you, Stella, for breaking the ice there. Okay. Sherry is familiar with the case. Okay. Matrix says, unfortunately. Okay. Honeybee is definitely on it. Okay. Thank you, Honeybee. Thank you. All right. Dark Side. Okay. If you could just take a quick moment and tell us in the audience, do you think this case is going to be solved within the next week or two? I just want to get an idea from you guys. You can just put a yes or a no. Do you think they're really going to solve this case anytime soon? Tell us in the audience if you think her case will be solved soon in regards to Nancy Guthrie. So far, we have quite a few people that know about it. Okay, One Love says no. Okay, C. Wayne says no. Okay, Stella says no. Sherry says no. Okay. It'll be solved later according to Dark Side. One Love says they need a distraction. Were you guys shocked to hear while I was out there, boots on the ground? Thank you, Brittany. Nice. Always good to see you, Brittany. Darlene, thank you. When I was out there, boots on the ground, Donald Trump said, listen, we pretty much need to move on from the case. Did you guys see that snippet from him? I found that to be quite intriguing as to why he would say, maybe he knows something we don't know, or maybe he feels like the case is going to take some time to figure it out. Matrix says it looks political. Stella says it's too many eyes. Okay, so they need to cool down the set, perhaps. Okay, Honeybee says not until they're willing to go deep. All right, they have to go deep. What a good way to phrase that. Thank you, Honeybee, for all you do here, too. We have the great moderators, and I'm so amazed by what you guys do. So that's it today for our News at Noon. We went over time by 43 minutes, folks, but today was a little bit different. We added on a segment here. Honeybee says, Brittany says, make sure everyone likes, subscribe, and tap the like button. Okay, twice on the screen. Thank you for that added support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, I'll be back tonight at 8 o'clock to do a deep dive. And One Love says, I agree, Mel. Trump is in the know. Yes, Donald Trump knows about just about everything. And he seems to be a guy that doesn't mind telling the American people what's really happening. And he's not afraid to, speak his mind. Honeybee says, this is a great place to be. Thank you. Okay, nice. We still need 11 more likes. Well, I think we've come far. I'm not going to keep stressing it too much. But thank you guys for trying to get us there to the 150. I really do see your great deeds. It's so kind of you. Thank you for tuning in and Watching the World. We do this every day. At noon, we have the Hot Topics News at Noon, where we talk about pressing matters throughout the world and try to make a sense of it together, having the opportunity to be able to express yourself in the comment section and talk with people from around the world who either agree with you or they just don't. But either way, it's great to have a good discussion. In many cases, we know that iron sharpens iron, right? It makes us better in some way, whether it's good or bad. Every encounter shapes us as individuals, and it shapes our lives. Dr. Oppenheimer says, time to buy. I think we're approaching that time, but I think we need more information before we start buying in the market, but that's just my opinion. Lisa says, 2010, I came to believe in the God of my understanding is nature. Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think that's nice of you to give us an idea of what you believe. Okay. Mud Butter says, why would Trump want World War III? That's a good question. Deuce says, it's not time to buy, yet inflation goes forward. Yes, indeed. Okay, thank you guys for tuning in. We had a great show. I'll see you guys back tonight at 8 p.m., but also tomorrow at News at Noon. Definitely drop in, say hi, give us a comment, give us a like, whatever it takes to just hear from you guys. We look forward to it. Have a good day until we see you back, and stay safe. We know we're living in some peculiar times, but if we lean on each other, I think we can get through this. Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Different voices, but the same song. Loving a world where we all belong. Kindness leading the way, breaking the chains. In the symphony of love, the thing remains. Embracing diversity, brighter days in sight. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. The colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.